I have seen some great brokers that do great deals. And let's stop using the word deals, everyone. Can we just use the right terms? Their commercial transactions, their purchases, their contracts. Let's use those. Deals, I cannot stand. But there are some consultants and brokers that do deals. Now, to the extent of whether those deals are good or not, I have no clue because I have yet to see one positive feedback about a broker that has done a deal and that the quality was great, the management of the supplier was great.
I'm really excited to have you on, and I'm really excited to share what you're working on and what's coming down the pipeline and your experience. I think it's taken for granted, and I find a lot of diamonds in the rough, and I feel like procurement, supply chain, and the experience that you and your team bring are just that for this industry. And so I'd love to welcome you. I'd love an intro about who you are, what you're doing, and where you came from, Sandra. So thanks.
Thank you, Mandi, for having me. So a quick overview of our company. CBO, believe it or not, we've been around since 2016. We are what I consider a hybrid purchasing group. So if everyone's familiar with group purchasing organizations, right? But they leverage their members' buying power to utilize that for discounts and rebates from their suppliers. Well, we not only act as a group purchasing organization, but we are really a procurement service provider at heart. What that means is that, yes, we are a third party, but we're a third party with our own staffing, which assists in a variety of tasks for our clients. And these tasks include anything from compliance to strategic sourcing, to category management, to supplier vetting and management, to even spend analysis. And there's so much more that I'm going to go into later on to show you. So really what we've been doing since 2016, we've been helping, given the nature of the industry, a lot of people are coming onto the scene without the proper business planning that they need. They think about, oh, I'm just going to farm, but then they don't know how they're going to sell it. Or I'm going to process, but then they don't have the rest of the business plan, right? So we've actually worked with a lot of farmers, in just business planning, market research before they even get up and running to determine which value chain they're going to focus on. So we've grown for CBD flower with some groups. Based off of our market research, we've grown a grain out of Virginia with another group. And then on top of that, we have doctors' offices, all these doctors reaching out to us to create CBD products that they want to sell out of their medical office. So we've been helping them with just implementing that supply chain. So that's literally how we work with folks in this industry. And we have big cannabis companies reaching out to us because now they're getting into their procurement strategies. So a lot of these people have been, focused on the growing and building up their customer base, but now they're understanding that 30% of everyone's revenue is what their expenses are in a business, whether it's indirect or direct. 30% of your revenue is all expenses for your company. And really, if you're not tracking your spend, which a lot of people in the hemp industry are not doing, how are you to determine whether you're still a startup or you're a small business or if you're a large business? You can't do any of that without analyzing your spend and knowing how much you're spending. So that's where we come into play as our company. We provide you support in all of that. And that's really what we bring, what we've been helping all the clients, everyone that comes to us. This is what we literally cradle to grave will give them, from business planning through compliance to helping them understand their spend and how to implement some of these procurement strategies that are important for them, like supplier diversity. How do we go about making sure that we're really encompassing diversity in our supply network? And then there's other, with so much saturation in the hemp industry, because there's a lot of growers now, A lot of growers that are doing things, but how do you differentiate which one's better than the other? And that's where we come into play. That's where our strategic sourcing comes into play, and we'll work one-on-one with the customer or the client. Nothing is cookie cutter in this industry. There's not one buyer that's the same. Every buyer has different evaluating factors that's important to them and their business. So nothing could be cookie cutter in this industry. And then that's really what we've been doing. We've helped cannabis companies get licensed in Michigan. We won our first license this past year with a group out of Michigan that we've been working 2 years. And we're the ones that created their SOPs. We're the ones that have facilitated the conversations between the city and the state, and really even managed their whole construction from design build to bidding to actually implementing the construction projects. And that is what procurement does. We literally are the heart of the operations.
How'd you get your experience? Talk to me about like, where'd you come from to get into this, right? And to figure this out.
So believe it or not, I started off obviously in the military. I was a police officer. So I've always had a niche for compliance one way or another. And procurement is a piece of compliance, right? But I really didn't. I went to school. I have my bachelor's in business administration and marketing, which gives me a good overview of all the business management that you need to run a business, right? And then I have my master's in public administration and economic disaster, which gives me the compliance, the government management side of the house. But really, in 2006, I started a job with the Coast Guard as a purchasing agent. And that's really what took off. Ever since that, I got into the whole world of acquisitions and purchasing, and I loved it, and I just excelled in it. So I literally have the highest procurement and contract certification that the federal government has to offer. It took about 7 years to complete. And it really is a continuous learning. If you're in this field as a purchasing agent or an acquisition professional, you have to have continuous learning every year to keep up on contract law, negotiations, things that affect the supply chain pretty much. And it isn't, anyone could become a buyer, but you need to have the education behind it. You need to have the understanding of why do you go to certain suppliers when you do? What kind of questions do you ask them? How do you analyze if that's a good price or not? Because guess what? Lowest price doesn't mean it's the best supplier at all. That's like the wrong answer.
Well, and you threw a lot of words out like acquisition and purchasing and buying, right? Those are big words that draw anybody's attention within the industry that's trying to develop, right? Because we're looking at growing. So talk to me about procurement. Like how does a procurement affect those things, or how do they tie together?
So procurement, plain and simple, procurement is the purchase of acquisition of goods and services that enable your business to operate in a profitable and ethical manner. That's the key, ethical manner, which is what's missing in this industry. That's why they're not really doing purchasing. They're literally, I don't know, what do you call it? They're just like, hey, Mandi, you know someone who has 5 million pounds of biomass? Yeah, okay, great. Let's do the deal.
Well, and I think this is where we get in. There's a lot of discussion within our association and on these calls about the broker jokers, right? Or joker brokers. And I feel like this brings some validity and some checks and balances to the supply chain and to the purchase and security to both buyer and our farmers, right?
Yep. So procurement, I'm going to show you now a diagram of what procurement looks like. There are 3 typical processes in procurement that we'll touch briefly on. It's the source to contract, procure to pay, and the source to pay.
Are you showing it to me now?
No, yeah, I'm gonna share it right now.
Okay, I don't see it yet, so. Okay, good. You're good.
So when I say that a person who's knowledgeable, a good buyer even a good buyer is going to be skilled and experienced in most of these categories. I'm not saying that they have to be, but at minimum, if you see the blues, at minimum, if you say that you're a purchasing agent or you're going to hire a buyer for your team, at minimum, they should be able to skillfully apply their knowledge in the requisitioning, the purchasing, and the payment portion of the procurement supply chain. Now, these are three processes that you see. The procure to pay is the process which begins with the requisition of goods and services and ends with the payment being issued to the vendor by accounts payable or whoever's doing the payments. This is where a lot of folks in the industry, this is where they fall into. However, it's not strategic because they're like, most of the time, many of them aren't doing the proper requisitioning processes, which is the market research. You know, they're doing it to an extent, but not doing it to fully what they should be doing to really benefit their client or their leadership, depending on the role that they serve. A lot of these jokers, they do operate in the procure to pay, but honestly, what do you know from experience? What are the broker's ultimate goal? It's for them to make money, right? Because what do they do? It's not transparent. They don't sit, they have the buyer and then they know the supplier, a couple suppliers or whatever the case may be, a farmers or whatever. And they're over here negotiating with the farmer just so that their cut could be big instead of doing what's right for both parties. And that's where procurement comes in. Even though we might work for you, Mandi, at the end of the day, because we have an ethical, we abide by we're an ethical profession. It's like a police officer or a lawyer. We are bound by ethical professionalism, especially if you're certified, to do what's right. And it's fully transparent. And that's where we come in because we're not only fair for you, Mandi, as the buyer, but we're also fair to the farmer, to the supplier, whoever it may be, because our price that we're going to negotiate is going to be reasonable for you to say, you know what, I accept that price. And then the farmer's still making the money that they should. And guess what? My cost was already dealt with you. There is a purchasing fee associated with this, or like, there is fees with everything. You got to pay the joker broker. They get paid a lot more money than what we charge for actually doing the procurement the right way. So
it's that transparency piece, right? Mm-hmm. What we're adding and what we've seen so much in the industry and the supply chain of the availability to change a COA, you know, or to combine product and say it's from one farm or, there's just a lot. And I'm not saying that's bad, but it's the lack of transparency or converting truth to what you want it to be to make that money, right?
And that's why, though, when someone gives us a COA, we just don't take it as this is their COA. We have to do our due diligence and making sure that's the real COA from the real lab, calling, asking. It seems like a lot of work, but if you have the right processes in place, it's literally could take seconds. And that's where we're automating a lot of these procurement functions with the software that we're getting ready to beta test. And this is the biggest, problem in this industry is people are like, oh, let me go on Facebook or LinkedIn to source and do my procurement. That does not work. It works to help advertise the opportunity, but you better have some backed up processes to make sure you're really mitigating all of your risks, all of the risks of like non-payment from the supplier, quality. Okay, now we're getting different biomass from 4 different farmers when we agreed it was that one lot, you know?
Yep.
So, I mean, again, it starts and it ends with procurement, your supply chain. And your bottom line starts and ends with procurement as well. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we really have to interact with sales. We have to interact with marketing. We have to interact with operations. So the industry today is that the procure to pay, but they're not there. They're only in a little piece of it. Then we have the source to pay. The source to pay is, my goodness, I'm so sorry. The source to pay, it provides value in the form of optimization, of preventing things that might prevent you from optimizing your operations, right? So the procurement team can leverage the insights from the data collected and analyzed using its procurement solution to perform vendor evaluation, which is huge, in onboarding, contract management, and detailed strategic sourcing, which is what I'm talking about. So all of our clients, when they come to us, this is what we practice. We practice source to pay, and we also practice source to contract, which source to contract, it makes reference to the collective set of procurement processes adopted when sourcing products or services, and it begins with analyzing the requirement. So a lot of these buyers, they don't know what they need, especially if they're not coming from the industry. So you have a lot of tech folks coming that want to deal with hemp and creating textile products or biofuel and want to work with even just basic CBD products, right? The buyers know what they want. They want to create an extra revenue line that will make them profitable, right? So they come to someone in the industry, a broker. That's the wrong person because they can't even help you down, like pinpoint what your requirements are to help you get that requirement. And that's where procurement comes into play. We will sit with you, Mandi, if you're not sure, and go through the requirements and your needs because we understand how to get that from you. If you tell me what your mission is for your company and what your vision and your long-term impact is, we can help you get the right specs down because guess what? I hate to say, I mean, it's the truth. As a procurement professional, you not only know what the market is saying and doing in cannabis or hemp areas, it's also every other area. I have knowledge. We all have knowledge in IT, construction. If you needed me to source from Arabia some oil, I know how to do that. I know what questions to ask. Airline industry, same thing. So in a procurement, we have to be knowledgeable enough to understand and research what every market is doing. Because guess what? A farmer, he not only needs hemp genetics or cannabis genetics, but guess what? Now he needs equipment. He needs temporary labor. How in they have huge problems just finding temporary labor.
Right.
So this is all the reasons why you need procurement. You need someone who can help you with it. You either got to hire someone on full time and pay them a salary, or you could come to someone like us and outsource different parts of this circle. I don't have to do all of it, but to be efficient, you should let us do all of it. But we will work. And if you do have existing people, like say you're a buyer for another company, or say even the broker brokers, if they want the education on how to give them understanding to be better at their job, guess what? We provide that for them. And we'll work with a team, like say Curaleaf or MedMan, who have, say, a chief procurement officer or who have buyers underneath them. We work with them in a non-obtrusive fashion, and we will work with them to get whatever mission, whatever their procurement strategy is, developed or implemented or applied. Okay,
so talk to me about, you gave background a little bit. I want to scroll for just a second, but you gave background. Talk to me about what have you seen in the industry as a request in procurement specifically?
What we've seen, so we've sourced seeds, genetics. Mm-hmm. We've sourced everything. We've sourced isolate. We've sourced all types of raw materials for folks. Terpenes. We've sourced construction services. We've sourced marketing services, legal services. We sourced everything. We've sourced everything, and then the majority of the work we do is a lot of market research and a lot of helping companies business plan.
Okay, so very cool.
Yeah. And what I'm trying to get, what we would love to see more of is let us manage these contracts for you, these supplier contracts. I spoke to a company yesterday, Mandi. I'm not going to say the state because everyone will probably know what it is, but this processing facility got a huge, $3 million grant to process. So the farmer who's growing for them, specifically because they got a huge contract from a non-plant facing company for animal feed, right? She calls me the farmer who's growing for them. And I said, well, one of the first things I said was, tell me that you implemented a contract for this, because I know it's just 5 acres that you're growing. It's nothing, right? And 5 acres, whatever. I said, but you still care about, because time is money. And that's where people don't understand. You might be giving your time for free, but nothing's for free because time is money. And she goes, no, we're just kind of doing it on good faith because they're a big company that got all this money and I'm doing other things for them. I was just like, oh my gosh, like why? Like and she goes, I know all the problems in the industry, but we're just going on good faith. It needs to stop. That needs to stop. I don't care, Mandi. Like we work together. Like I'm going to have a contract with you.
Well, I think that it's important. Contracts make friends in business. I mean, contracts, it gives you something to fall back on. It's security. It keeps me from having to bump up against my friendship when I like somebody, to be able to go back and say, listen, we agreed. It's right here. That's it. And it's simple as giving me a sense of security in, we're going to keep our word. And because we're friends, I trust this document and nothing more is going to happen. At that point, it'll be a document. But until it gives us relationship, it gives us security, it gives us, everything about it.
And at the end of the day, whether we're friends or not, this is a business. Right. Especially, and there should be contracts for everything, but I'm really just talking about your supplier contracts or your contracts if you are going to be doing contract growth, contract manufacturing, contracts for services. That all needs to be, you need to have a contract. And sure, will people enforce it? They should, because it's that easy when there's a violation. And guess what else is procurement? People don't understand. We are the triage department for the legal department. Lawyers, they could do contracts, but guess what? When it comes to due diligence, they're going to come to someone like me to consult with them on, did so-and-so follow their due diligence in the breach of this contract? Because the legal folks, unless they're specializing contract law, which a lot of them aren't, there are some specific lawyers that will only do contract law and are vetted, and they do everything cradle to grave, but they're procurement contract lawyers, So we are the triage for that, and we do work very close with the legal teams, with our legal teams and with our clients' legal teams to make sure, especially when they're high dollar.
Well, as you should, right? And especially as the industry is evolving.
Yeah.
This is where, so talk to me about like opportunities and why it really matters when it comes to businesses. You've touched on a lot of really good points, but I know there's one that we haven't really talked about is tax opportunities.
So the tax opportunities right now, if you think about it, for cannabis, the 280E tax deductions, there's only a couple deductions that you can use to actually write off, right? That refers to your cultivation, your processing, the retail end of it. So if you have proper procurement instituted, that tracks your spend in each of those categories. So your accounting or your finance team will be able to pull reports easy enough from just what we've done in the procurement department. So that is the importance of just really procurement filters into every other thing that you need to operate your business. Accounting, sales, marketing, it literally does. It all works together. So for hemp, you need to have paperwork to show the banks that you're spending, how much you're making, all of this, what types of products. I had to provide all that information to my bank. Guess what? All these folks that aren't properly, they're having the accounting system and just the paper, the administrative side, they don't have that to support what they need to submit. So something as simple as procurement software that we're coming out with, or even just old school way. If you want to do it the paper way or have files for your contracts, that is still, you can still do that without money. Like there's ways to implement your procurement without putting capital up front. And it all starts with the process. So, at the end of the day, purchasing is about transactions that get you what you want when you want it, right? It's about building long-term win-win relationships with partners to get the whole supply chain performing at the next level. And really, that's what the hemp industry needs. And for cannabis, that's what they demand because of the compliance that's put on them, the scrutiny. So
this is okay. I never became interested in supply chain or procurement until I got involved with hemp, right? You have been involved and then came into the cannabis industry, right? What was your drive? Like what about procurement is like, hey, this is something that really fuels, because you're clearly very passionate. And I think hemp just is an example of a tool to drive that passion, because it's a true solution for so many of these problems and so many of these things you're addressing.
Yeah. So I consider myself a true acquisition professional, meaning that I am embedded in every aspect of the life cycle, which is the little circle of craziness that I showed you, right? I understand that if you remove one of those pieces, how it affects your company, and it can make or break you. So, I've been working in government for over 15 years, and in government, there's just a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of things, there's even a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse, which I hate. I mean, as a procurement professional, you cannot stand fraud, waste, and abuse in anything that you do. So, and in this industry, there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse. So my brother has been involved in cannabis since 7th grade, pretty much. He went to Amsterdam University out in California back in 2015 to get his certification in horticulture to back up, his skills of being able to do whatever he's been doing since 7th grade. So he started working for a bunch of cannabis farms in Colorado. And so one day, like, we were just going back and forth talking, and I was like, how does your farmer, the owner, how do you guys find the supplies and services you need? And he was like, and this is back in 2015, he's like, well, everything is hush hush because nobody trusts anybody and it's all shady. And I was like, oh my God, you need procurement. Boom, the light came out. I was like, that's the problem with this industry. And I promise you, Mandi, since that day, the next day, I pretty much mimicked everything the government does in terms of procurement and mimicked it all. And then kind of like I've adapted it to fit what the current situation is. And I've been educating folks on that. And that's really what put procurement and supply chain importance on this spectrum since then. Because I'm the only one talking about it. Like other folks are talking about it indirectly, but I'm like, do they really know the impact at the end of the day? Do you as a CEO understand how even your office supplies can make or break your bottom line?
I do. What I don't understand is the how. And I think this is the part that becomes so critical, and where I think people need to pay attention to experience and who's on our teams and the why we're connecting with companies like yours, right? Is this one, experience in the industry, and two, past experience, government experience. I'll tell you what, your organization is mind-boggling. I want to come in and be you when I grow up, when it comes to skill. And so I give a shout out about, like what you said, is having what you need for taxes, having what you need to report if something were to happen. I just think that all of it is so heavily impacted. And I think that it's if I spend $10 versus $5, of course that affects me differently. But
yeah,
how to track it and how to implement it and how to change it. I think that that's another really big piece, right? So talk to me a little bit more. I think we got a little bit off track. I know we were talking, I really wanted to talk about the value. I really wanted to talk about benefits. We've touched on a lot. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
So, yeah, I mean, so when it comes in terms, and we've already touched upon this as value or even the benefits, at the end of the day, the value of procurement is the innovation, especially in this industry, both the cannabis and the hemp industry, because folks are coming over from, say, the black market running these businesses because they have, they're great at growing and they're great at, extracting and processing, but they might not understand all the key components to long-term success for their business. And that's why you probably have seen a lot of companies go out of business, lose money, lose investment money. And if you have investors and you have taken money, you need to call me. You need to call me, because the last thing you want to do is lose all those investors' money, all because of maybe implementing something like procurement process where it could mitigate the other so many risks. Like it would just alert you before it even happened. So procurement is a great source of innovation. It makes it work through collaboration with other businesses to find new sources of supply, which drives sustainability and growth for a company. Then, the biggest benefit in this is that you have peace of mind knowing that you have a security of supply. We see a lot of people like, these are manufacturers that produce a lot of the topicals. Like I've seen them on LinkedIn posts. Oh, we couldn't get this material, so now our production is delayed. Like that's the worst thing you could ever do. Guess what? That wouldn't have happened had you had contracts in place and backup plans with other suppliers. Then you have lowered costs on indirect expenses.
I think you said something really important is the backup, right? And having multiple supplies, because we saw a lot of people say, well, I had a contract and I have one farmer and I'm going to grow or sell to one person. It's like, wait a minute. What happens if that falls through? What happens if their equipment doesn't show up? What happens if it breaks down? What happens if we can't get parts? What happens if weather? I mean, there are millions of things that we saw that created loss, right? But I think another value is, and I think what we need to really pay attention to is the network and the development of multiple sources so that we can make up for that. And until we get that in line, big brands are not going to come on. We're not going to see it grow because it has to be consistent, steady source.
Exactly.
A lot of that. Exactly.
Yeah. And really, plain and simple, the current sourcing practices in this industry are inefficient and not mitigating the risk of fraud, waste, and abuse. It's not tracking social equity. It's not promoting supplier diversity. It's not promoting competition in a saturated market. It's just not doing any of that. So something needs to change, and everyone really just needs to jump onto the procurement train, or at least, revamp your processes and make sure that you do have the basic 6 things that you have to incorporate in a process is that you have to have a spend analysis. So you need to understand that if you're not gathering your spend data from accounts payable or anything else to determine compliance, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. If you're not doing strategic sourcing, which is identifying sourcing projects, identifying suppliers, running sourcing events, evaluating responses, you're starting off on the wrong foot. If you're not incorporating, negotiating, executing, or managing contracts, that in itself is horrible. If you're not doing the requisition process where you have especially if you're running a company, I could see if you're a one-man show, the requisition starts and ends with you, right? But come on now, all these other companies, if you have VC money, you better be having a requisitioning process. And I can tell you from experience, I'm not allowed to disclose a lot of things, but I was involved with a company where I was managing member, and literally I could not get my other partners to get onto the procurement train. And guess what it did? I exited the company and it went to shits. So, and this is all from not putting the right processes in place. I want to use this example of, of like the MedMan example last year, how MedMan, the CEO, got laid off or something because they overspent, right? And so what did they do? They cut all the costs from labor. They cut positions. They fired people. Not once did I read that they even took a look at their procurement processes. Had they looked at their procurement processes, which is 30% of their revenue, they could have saved most of those positions that were needed, or they could have consolidated. And that, again, that's where procurement comes into play. We help you analyze all of that before you make decisions like that could impact the whole company in itself.
You said something that 30%, is that standard or pretty average, or?
So not that 30% of your revenue is what on average for all the other industries out there besides hemp and cannabis. I'm not sure because there is no research. And what we're trying to do in our company is, as a centralized source of procurement, we're gathering all that data. And right now it's not even close. It's more actually, depending on the companies that we've worked with alone. So, but on average, 30% is the correct number. 30% of your revenue is what your indirect and direct expenses should be. If you're doing anything more than that, you really need to take a look at your processes. And then 5% of that should be waste, fraud, waste, and abuse. There should be no more than 5% waste, fraud, and abuse occurring in your company. If you're up and running, obviously. And remember, it doesn't apply to startups, but again, you have to start somewhere, especially in this industry.
Where we're at in the industry is we're seeing this wave of established businesses getting into or bringing hemp into. I don't want to say getting into hemp. People are using hemp in processes that already exist, right? And so now it's a matter of, well, where do I get it? Who do I get it from? Where is it reliable? What process? Because the industry isn't set up. So, when you say, what I hear often is people in the industry, consultants or brokers, offering a similar service, right? Talk to me about really what sets you different, sets you apart, and why.
So I don't want to put every broker into this category because it's not fair to say all the brokers. So I have seen some great brokers that do great deals, and let's stop using the word deals, everyone. Can we just use the right terms? They're commercial transactions, they're purchases, they're contracts. Let's use those. Deals I cannot stand. But there are some consultants and brokers that do deals. Now, to the extent of whether those deals are good or not, I have no clue because I have yet to see one positive feedback about a broker that has done a deal and that the quality was great, the management of the supplier was great, the cost was really great, on top of them not getting a majority of the money. You see what I'm saying? So basically, I like to use this example. Mandi, if you had heart issues, would you go to a brain surgeon or a cardiologist? That's literally what it is. That is the best example I could give you because procurement is a professional position, just like a lawyer. Mm-hmm. It's not just, anybody could just join and be thrown into the field. It won't happen. It takes time to understand and really get skilled at it, at every single aspect of spend analysis, cost and price analysis, supplier vetting, all of that. So it's really about just going to the right person for what you really need. Mm-hmm. So, and like I said, these brokers, they have the potential, especially the good ones that want to be ethical and provide that transparency. They need to get the basic certification and education behind it. And we are working with an actual global leader in education of procurement and supply chain who's going to be offering their certification and education through us to these professionals, to these brokers that want to come and take it. But guess what? You're going to have to pay. Knowledge is power, and you have to pay for your education. You have to pay for these certifications. And anyone doing business in this industry needs to start looking for certified project managers, certified buyers, certified, folks to help them operate in their operations to be successful.
So remember when we were talking earlier about our program, you just listed like 3 needs that we could focus on that would be really awesome. So we can do that.
Yeah.
Those are 3 big industry needs, right? That immediately we can impact or need to be impacting. So talk to me, there's a lot of people out there that say, well, I'm the best. I'm the reason you should. And I'm that, I'm this. And the very first piece of advice I got when I came into this industry, and I'm not joking, the first piece of advice, I stood at the end of a table and I said, I'm new to the industry and tell me something I should know. And he says, everybody thinks they're the best and everybody thinks they know it all, right? And so what I've learned is really I want to know why and how, and how are you guys, what sets you guys apart? How are you getting through what you're doing?
So I could tell you, I am not the best of the procurement that's out there in this world, because I could tell you there are some incredible chief purchasing officers that are running Fortune 500 companies. There's room for improvement for everybody. I know that, but I'm going to tell you right now, I do think I have an upper hand in this industry, and I'll tell you why. Because I am the first and only procurement service provider for the hemp and cannabis industry. There is a group purchasing provider called Botanico that is a group purchasing organization. They do not get into the weeds like we do. They refer people to us, and if we need to, we refer people to them. But as it stands, and then I can't speak for every single purchasing folks at MedMan or Kush has or any other company, because I'm not interacting with them, but I could tell you, show me your numbers and I'll tell you exactly how good your procurement team is. But in the sense of this industry and in the sense of comparing myself to brokers and consultants, I want to see, if I'm going to go to you for sourcing or contract management, what are your certifications? What's your experience and skill level? Do you continuously do continuous learning every year? Because guess what? I do 80 hours of continuous learning every single year, no matter how expert I think I am. Because guess what? When I go to those classes, I'm learning something completely new that's coming, because guess what? Technology is changing. Business strategy is changing. So that means I have to adapt with that. And then I also think my background, my military background, my government background, just having a really good bird's eye view of how a supply chain works or how a business is supposed to operate, and being able to visualize that as a domino. I understand, I can literally do an audit on any company and say, this is where your issues are and this is how to rectify them. And that's why we do get called on. But no, I'm not the best of the world of procurement, because procurement is such a huge industry across every sector.
Sure. And I'm not saying that, but what I hear is and see is a lot of people shut down as soon as people say, or I shouldn't even say that. I shut down. Knowing enough about the industry, when I hear people say we're the best, right? So where I'm curious is, what sets you apart in your space, right? We're really good as an association in hosting events, bringing people together, connecting people to this supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the biggest values to collaboration. You mentioned it a couple of times, and I just gave a presentation on collaboration where linking up where you are very strong at this piece and very strong where I am not. I personally am not, right? And so as an association where we have grown our around the lead generation and the connections in the front end of this. And so once people come into your space, what type of security do we give them? And talk to me like market research, solicitation. Talk to me about all of these different pieces. And I'm
So,
my hands a lot today.
yeah. So what sets us apart, and honestly, is that we stay in our lane. I don't say that I can put on events and host events and interview people, because that's not what I do. But guess what? I am the best at what I do, which is procurement, because I know that I'm doing my market research to the T the way that it's supposed to do. I know, and mind you, all these terms I'm throwing at you, these are all subcategories of different areas of procurement, and they all have processes to each and every one of them. So I know how to do market research with my eyes closed, acquisition planning, solicitation process. It's just not, hey, let me call and get a quote. I mean, that could happen too, but there's also other things that are involved with soliciting. Then there's the negotiation aspect of it. Then there's the award aspect of creating a legal instrument and documentation. Not everyone can do that. Like, you cannot, Mandi, unless you have contract law experience at minimum, you should not be drafting any types of contracts. We always draft contracts, but we also get them, they're blessed off by our legal team or by our client's legal team to make sure, but I have the ability, and our certified contract specialists have the ability to create those clauses because they have the same type of contract law training that the lawyers do. They know where to look up for the UCC codes. They know where to look up clauses, stuff like that. So that's why we can formulate these contracts, get them blessed off, and then execute them. And then people are like, and this is where the brokers usually stop, is at when they, after negotiation and award, right? They're supposed to, who knows if they're really negotiating? Well, they're negotiating their cost, but they stop it at right there. You never see someone, or you never hear about it, and I could be wrong, but again, I'm talking from what I've seen from my perspective. They don't handle the post-award management. Support doesn't stop once the contract is awarded. But we take pride in stellar acquisition, quality. The work that we do to minimize the risk at every single stage. That's the key. And that's why I feel like we are the best procurement service provider for the hemp and cannabis industry. We're here to help their purchasing teams, your purchasing teams. We're here to educate you. And if you don't have anybody to help you, we're here to offer our services to help you. So it's a win-win in my eyes. It's a win-win.
Well, and I think really where this gains more leg, right, is when we have buying power, right? And I've said this for a long time. I actually had a really good conversation with a true pioneer in this industry for the US is in order for us to be successful, we have to be able to come together, right? And I think that comes to giving, how do we get our small farms the capability to compete big markets? That a little bit?
Yeah. So the way what we like to do is with the smaller farms is kind of like what co-ops do, but what we do is we establish pre-negotiated contracts and terms with these smaller folks. Like, I already know what their lead times are. And when I say lead time, what time, like, from the date of I submit an order, how long it's going to take them to send that biomass to XYZ, because that's already pre-negotiated. I already know that within this season, I'm going to have available 50,000 pounds to be able to work with. Like, so that's really with the buying power. The key is to have pre-negotiated contracts in place to make it easy to order when the buyers do come. And also, like, for those folks like the manufacturer whose supplier dropped the ball and now he's like, oh shoot, I don't have any, my production's delayed. For them to come to us and just directly order without having to vet or assess or negotiate, because all these contracts are already pre-negotiated.
Awesome. 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 So consulting, we talked about like software, procurement, I think, is so much about the efficiency and AI, and you're starting to see so much of that being discussed within the industry. How does that really play into what you're doing?
So software is pretty much, it makes everyone's life easier, regardless of what you're trying to do or what you're using it for. Accounting, legal, maybe your CRM. Everyone's using some kind of software. I have to admit that some of the farmers I worked with do not use anything but paper. They're old school, which again is a learning curve. Everyone needs to learn to adapt to start implementing business practices that's going to make them long-term efficient, and technology is one of them, right? So in procurement, I don't know Mandi, like some of the smaller folks do it. I'm sure they're using Excel. I'm sure they're going back emails back and forth, because even though we're getting ready to launch a software, since 2016, we've been doing it the old contracting way, which is still through emails, stuff like that. But because of the time it takes, some people are really like, we just got a request in to buy about 6,000 milliliters of terpenes. Like the guy emailed me. So it's like, that's not efficient. When you have a lot of requests, it literally slows you down. Then you can't track it, and guess what? All the stuff that everyone's doing, they like to go to Facebook and LinkedIn, just do one post, and then 25 million people are all posting, I got it, DM me, I got it. What's so hard about just logging into something, posting what you need, and then guess what? Hitting a button where it goes out to all the suppliers that are already vetted and able to provide. And then when the information comes in, then you evaluate. And guess what? All that's already rated for you. The money's tracked. It's all at the ease of a button. And that's what our technology is going to do for this industry. And it's not technology. I know people are going to be like, oh, another technology platform. But guess what? There's ways to integrate it with your existing CRM if you have to.
It's not new in the sense that new practices. This exists in every industry.
Yep.
And so I think that that's true. It's like, yes, it's new technology because it's something that's not discussed a lot when we talk about it within this industry as it's growing and building, but it's still in every other industry.
Yeah. No, and that's one of the things people need to just get over it. You have to apply this industry and treat it like a real business, because guess what? The Fortune 500s, the Coca-Colas, they're only going to deal with businesses that are practicing normally. And if you're not, you don't have a competitive advantage against everyone else who's going to be, there as to either merge with them or be their supplier. They don't want to work with irresponsible suppliers. They want to work. And guess what? The government's the same way. If you don't have an accounting system, process system, a QA/QC process, you can't even do work for the government. It's the same thing with big companies, with big Fortune 500 companies. Everyone needs to just start implementing tomorrow or today, just best practices for general business, for long-term success. That's it.
Well, and I think, today when we were talking about roadblocks and this other presentation, roadblocks in the industry, I think that that's a good example. We've been dealing with this black market industry and it's new and emerging. And really what's happening is you're seeing this merge from existing practices that are coming over, which only makes sense. We're not reinventing the wheel, and there's no sense in doing so. Right?
Yep.
As you set up your software and this tracking and vetting, you use the word vetted. What are the standards? Where do you pull standards, or what work needs to be done to really support? What does that standard look like? does the company come to you and say, hey, I want to buy herd at this spec and I need you to find it? Or
So it works like that. It could be, but then there's sometimes where people are like, I need to create hempcrete. I just need herd and lime and all this. And I don't know. Like, that's all they know. So then we have to educate them. Well, the processing in itself, what kind of micron size are you looking for? Then some buyers, they care about the equipment that the processors are using. Well, what kind of equipment do they have? What are their capabilities of production? Because guess what? Like, a government buyer is not going to want to mess with a small processor that's got, a little processing machine that can't do 50 tons of production a day. Because, they're thinking about the long-term production. Remember, most of these big buyers are coming in because they already know the demand they're going to have. They have estimates already. And guess what? Now their supply chain, they just got to find those right suppliers that can provide us the capabilities that they're supposed to be doing. So, I mean, and like I said, it's all different for every buyer. And this is why we literally go from the beginning through the requirements, through everything that's possible that could come up, and then we execute. And that's why it's always successful for the end customer and even the suppliers.
I imagine as standards develop, this will help big time with this software.
Oh, yeah.
As sourcing, automated sourcing and being able to help, like almost co-op model, but small farmers compete at a competitive price because they can get involved if their standards or specs meet.
Yep. And
we're not talking as much about
procurement, the act of just procuring in itself. I could just tell you from the government's perspective, procurement exists to help small businesses grow to large businesses. So my heart coming into this industry, is for these big Fortune 500. I want to be we are that centralized place where Levi's could come to us, or the government comes to us, to say, hey, we're looking for this, this, and this. And guess what? I'll be able to then use the sourcing and what we do, the vetting, to then narrow it down from all these people that are capable, because everyone's capable to an extent. But it's just that, do you have the extra factors that these buyers need? Do you have the technical? Do you have the quality? Do you have the past performance? Do you have the financials to keep up with operations? And I've heard, well, I don't know how people give you accounting information when you're doing a buying decision. Well, you know what my answer to that is? Anyone that wants to do real business and it's a real request will give you whatever it is to prove that they're capable. And if they don't want to do it, then it's either because they're ignorant enough to not go through the proper practices, or
or they don't have it
because they're all talk.
Whatever reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I always say real businesses will pop up any documentation you want if you're going to be buying, and vice versa. A supplier will give us what we need when we come to them with requests, because that's our number one rule is we don't bother you unless it's a real request from a real buyer.
Well, and again, this comes back to vetting real, right? And I think that this is with systems in place and being able to vet, I'm taken back sometimes by the processes and the time that it takes, because I get asked these questions too, right? And I'll tell whoever listens that collaborating and working with people like you, pointing the other direction, are exactly where we as an organization or an industry can grow, because we can rise tides by working with people that are doing it right, with the real, right? So you had mentioned earlier a little bit, social responsibility, right? And how CEOs are being let go. And you mentioned one company in particular. I don't know if you want to touch back on that or go back and talk about social responsibility and CEOs being.
Yeah. So that really, when I was talking about MedMen, I was using that as an example that they went directly and cut costs across labor and fired people when they should have looked at the procurement processes first to see how they could have dealt and fixed the problem there before going to other places.
Right.
But remember that the overall goal of procurement is to help companies meet their social responsibilities. Meaning if you're a company that's running on poor ethical processes, like that's the whole point of procurement, is to help you get that fixed, right? Supplier reliability, which, it's a huge thing. We need to make sure that these people are going to deliver the goods and services that we need on time, on budget, because that's all plays into a part of the production. Then there's the procurement process automation that we have already touched upon, and then risk mitigation at the end of the day. So everything we talk about goes back into the social responsibility of the company, their culture, like what goals have they set up for, that needs to happen. Like Curaleaf is implementing a supplier diversity program. Like that's huge, So at the end of the day, your procurement strategy, which is your goal, all leads to the way that you have your company set up and what's important to you, your mission and your vision. And at the end of the day, whether or not you're in it for long-term or short-term success. And that could easily be told by how you run your company.
It's really a piece of education, right, that's forgot about. And we talk about it like entrepreneurship. I just think we miss the boat. We're shooting in the wrong direction sometimes.
And it's all a learning. It's all a learning curve in this industry. Everyone's going to learn everything at some point, whether it's too late or just in time. That's to each of the leadership. Mm-hmm. So the leaders need to get on board and go back to the drawing board with basic business planning. What is it that they want? What is their goal? We should actually ask that, Mandi, in one of your questions. What is your goal for your business?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what's your goal?
Well, and I think that it's interesting. I think goals and actions often don't match, right? Where you're headed and what you're actually doing. And I think this comes back to collaboration too, and working with people that actually understand the procurement process, and taking you back to actually being able to analyze that process versus just being the visionary, right? Mm-hmm. We were at about an hour, and I want to wrap up because I want to talk about our clubhouse, what you're planning to do there, and I also want to talk about the purchasing assessments.
Okay, so our purchasing assessment and what we're going to do for all the members of GHA is we'll go ahead and issue a purchasing assessment where they just have to answer a couple of questions. And then what we do is we'll analyze it to determine their level of procurement risk. What's missing in their company or where they should start. Are they a good candidate for, putting some type of procurement processes in it? So that's where the purchasing assessment, we will start off always assessing if a client wants to come in and, say, I need to revamp or transform my procurement office. Like that's where we start. Or if a person's like, I don't even know if I should do procurement processes or not. Like some of the questions that we have on the sheet will prompt them to really think about some of their processes. And then we'll be able to determine, okay, well, you're really at risk of supplier just failure down the line because of not having this and this and this.
Right.
So, and then also on May 19th, we've actually teamed up with Mebach Supply Chain Company, which is really great because procurement and supply chain interact with each other. Supply chain procurement is a primary activity of supply chain management. So we are going to be doing for the next 5 months this 20-minute clubhouse seminar on procurement and supply chain in the industry. And that's going to be every third Wednesday at Clubhouse at 4:20 for 20 minutes. Yeah, for 20 minutes. And it'll be myself and Jason, who's one of the managers over at Meebach. And Meebach is a global company. They're known all over the world, and they do the U.S. headquarters is out of, I believe, Indiana. And I think you're going to be interviewing them as well, Mandi. At some point.
Excited.
They're a great company.
The more I get into this and the more that I explore leaders in the industry, success is driven around the supply chain and procurement. I mean, it just really is. And so I'm not blind to it. But like I said, I had no knowledge or education about this before I got into hemp. I didn't realize how broken supply chains were, especially in the textile industry or the agriculture space. And I think that the pandemic just unfolded that on top of realizing hemp is such a solution for so much of this. Yeah. So to recap real quick, give me an overview of procurement. Talk to me about why should people be listening, and how do people reach out to you and your company?
So in all, the ultimate role of procurement is to help business maximize your profit. And it's done by balancing the cost reduction, your supplier quality, assurance of supply, and increasing and unlocking supplier innovation. Procurement also helps with the compliance and reduces the overall risk of your supply chain failing. The way that you can get in touch with us is directly from our website. There's literally, if you want to source something, hit the sourcing button and just fill out a form. If you want to report people, I love using Facebook and LinkedIn, but airing out everyone's dirty laundry and then having it is not the way it should happen. There's a way to do it. And what we have is we're actually collecting all these horror stories with the facts. And when our buyers come to us or our members and say that Joe Schmo from Hemp Biomass Supplier is up for an award from us, we'll go through our database and pull up all of the performance complaints, whether it's a complaint or a praise, and we'll use that to show our members or our buyers so that they could use that as a evaluation factor of whether or not, because at the end of the day, your performance is going to determine whether or not you get that deal or that contract. So we actually, if people want to do it in a legitimate way where it's fair and reasonable, you also have a space on our website to submit any complaints or praises on any contractors or anybody, farmers, processors, consultants, anybody in the book. And we will make sure that if those people ever came up for consideration, that information is shared with our clients. So it is a proper way, because in other industries, past performance is tracked. Like obviously the Better Business Bureau does it. It's done in an efficient process. And right now, just the craziness on social media and people being able to chime in, it's just crazy. And it doesn't do it justice in what it's supposed to do.
What I'm finding is a lot of these people that have the knowledge and are doing it right are not on social media. We talk a lot about where do we meet them, and a lot of time it's in their garage or the barn or their office or behind their, they're not on the computer. They're not holding a podcast in their hand. They're not, And so I think that, keeping in mind that utilizing resources like yours gives us or anybody utilizing you as a whole new set of arms and legs. You have how many people on your team that have networks that grow, and you're collecting this data, building this web basically, right? And I think it's so valuable within the industry to understand. That piece.
So on our website, you could submit a source request. On our website, you could register as a member or a buyer within our organization. You could also submit a request if you're a consultant, if you're both plant-facing or non-plant-facing, if you are a legal business, and again, I say legal business, at minimum, you must be registered with the Secretary of State office and operating. Please, we will vet you. Please submit your information as a supplier in our database. It doesn't cost anybody anything to sign up to be just a person in our database. Where it does get into commissions or sometimes some benefits will be if you want to be a strategic or a preferred vendor of ours. And then that comes with a lot of other bonuses like marketing and memberships to other organizations, stuff like that. And with the sourcing, there is a fee. We do charge a fee. It's all dependent on what you're asking for, what type of contract, like the labor that's going to go into, because remember, we didn't even touch upon this, but there's so many different types of contracts that we could implement. Firm fixed price, time and materials, incentive contracts that people don't even know about that we could really use and implement to benefit not only and promote the supplier performance, but also benefit the buyer in different avenues. Right. So this is why
fast moving product. Yeah. That's the whole thing is I think when people think broker or when people think moving product, it really is. I envision a broker being a transaction of biomass or flower. Mm-hmm. It's not everything that leads up to it and everything after that transaction.
Yeah. I believe brokers have their place, and usually most of them are in the sales. So they should be partnering up with these suppliers and becoming part of their sales team because they're really good at outreach and but leave the other stuff that's important to the professionals to negotiate, But yeah, at the end of the day, everything is just reach us through our website, cannabisops.com. And also at Clubhouse, you can follow us at all of our social medias at cannabisops.com as well.
You're awesome. Awesome.
Thank you, Mandi.
So much for joining us. And thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to keep working together and move this forward. And when you said earlier that there's all kinds of contracts that keep coming, you're exactly right.
There's so many different. And we didn't even touch about the government stuff either. That's a whole nother interview.
I know I wanted to, but I don't know how much we want to get into it. So once things get moving a little bit with some of the stuff you have going on, let's do this again.
Perfect, for sure.
We'll keep talking more. So,
yes.
Thank you so much again. I'm excited. For anybody that has questions, don't hesitate to reach out or holler at either of us. But if you need help reaching out to Sandra, don't hesitate to call me. Follow us on our website. Other than that, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.